Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Magnetic Podcast. Super excited today. We have a good friend of mine, Juan Meisel, who is the founder and CEO at Grip. Juan, thank you so much for hopping on today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first thing I wanted to do is give the audience, people listening, if you don't mind, give them a little bit of background on yourself and how you got here today.
Yeah, of course. So, born and raised in Colombia, South America, and the North Coast. After that, I came to the U.S. to Boston specifically for school. It's colder than what I thought. And then, while in Boston, I joined the very early team of ButcherBox as maybe the fourth or fifth person in the team. And it's a direct-to-consumer frozen meat company that we bootstrap from 0 to 600 mil in yearly revenues in 6 to 7 years. And then now, a couple of years ago, we started Grip, a new company. And what we're doing at Grip is basically everything we wish we had while at ButcherBox in terms of figuring out how to ship a frozen box of meat or a frozen box of something or a refrigerated box of something in the mail to the final customer. So we've developed a lot of technology to figure out that full process and make sure that boxes are delivered how they're supposed to and customers are happy.
That's awesome. I think this is now probably, I think, the third time where we've had a guest on who's worked in a direct-to-consumer format, and then they moved into a software that solved the problems they solved at the direct-to-consumer brand. So I think that's actually pretty interesting. We had Tyler Dank from Beehive, and then we had Ty Haney from Outdoor Voices. And I think both were at some sort of direct to consumer. They built out a model or a playbook, and then they went and built software to help kind of replicate it at scale. So is that similar to kind of what you guys did over at ButcherBox and then now Grip?
Yeah, totally. And I think that that's going to happen more and more as we go because we're basically like a graduating generation class of people who built great brands and people who figured out great products, and then we're basically like crushed against a pretty big problem of, hey, if I were to figure this out or if I were to do this X and Y problem better, then I can scale my company much faster and much better and much profitably. So there's going to be a generation, and we are already a generation of or a graduating class of people that are coming from those problems. So yeah, I mean, totally. At ButcherBox, it was all about, hey, how can we increase margins while shipping these boxes of meat in the mail? How can we keep our customers happy? How can we take costs out while still taking care of the customer? So it's always something that was very, very present. And if you look at the history of shipping perishable stuff in the mail, it's a relatively new market. Normal e-commerce has been around for at least twice the amount than perishable objects e-commerce has been around. And that means that now's the time where founders or early team members are graduating from that class and building solutions to some of the pain points that they had.
And for you, what's been more exciting? Was it early days at ButcherBox and scaling that, or is it now doing it sort of in a more scalable way from a software perspective?
It's a good question, and I can hurt some feelings with this response. But both are very exciting. We were growing extremely fast at Grip, and we have thankfully a very similar culture than what we built at ButcherBox. Both companies are two completely different things and somewhat different cultures. But but I have the feeling in both that, hey, we're putting something very special together. And we just had our 2024 company offsite last weekend, where we took the entire company to Colombia and spent 4 days there, basically planning for 2024 and setting up the goals and looking at strategy and then having a lot of fun together. And it definitely took me back to the early ButcherBox days where we did our first retreat in Vermont, the second one in Mexico, and it was this small but basically fast growing team feeling that we had in Colombia last weekend as well.
Okay, so we'll put a pin in that one. It sounds like both were great. Don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Totally understand that. What's something unique, though, that you enjoy about the software side that you didn't get from the more product-focused brand?
On the software side, I like that I like that I get to see our customers' businesses and help them unlock things that were hurting them before, or things that they necessarily like were not optimizing as much before. So I like that Grip basically plays like an active advisor role in these companies with the software and the way that we work with them super closely, where we just get to see the different businesses and help. And I think that the way that we're developing the product and working with our customers, that has a bigger, wider touch and value add to just the community and the world in general, versus just focusing on your one product. So that's what I like about the software offering, and I also like just creating relationships with our customers, which on the product offering you do the same, but it's more on a one-to-one basis, where you're shipping at the end of the day millions of these boxes, and it's also very impactful, but you're working on like that one problem. But we now basically took a step up in the supply chain, and now we can touch multiple companies and just add value to multiple different offerings and products out there.
Yeah, that's really good. I think one of the things that I've learned with Nifty Bridge is the value of a customer is just a lot different too. But just exactly what you're talking about, you can use them to really learn and grow, and kind of like they can be a part of that build out just as much as you are, building the software. They're helping you understand feedback. And I think from a product standpoint, I don't have as much experience as you, but I do know that when there's that kind of scale, thousands of customers, it's hard to get as deep into how that product's affecting their life, as opposed to with software. I feel like if you have one really, really good customer, that's worth 100 regular customers, because they can build out exactly what everybody else will eventually need. They can sort of create that playbook, which has been really exciting. So it's cool to see that you've seen that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked to be very close to the customer, even if you're talking about that one person who's buying one box of meat, or an institution or a company that we have a very strong and big partnership with. And I'll give you a couple examples of these. Like at Grip, we work with what we call fast innovation cycles, which means that we go from idea to product to feedback very fast, but we have the customer in the middle of that equation. So in every single stage of this triangle, we speak with the customer and we make sure that we're developing the product with them and not for them. So keeping the customer very, very centered in that full product development cycle. And then an example from the ButcherBox days is we had as a goal that every single company member had to speak with at least 5 customers, very regularly. I don't, remember specifics, but I remember that we used to have a custom box offering where our customers would have to select 3 items from basically low cost list, and then 3 items from a high cost list. And we split it between those two. And the reason behind that was because, oh, well, then if someone goes in and they just buy 6 ribeye steaks, then we're just going to be at a loss with this customer. And we thought that was going to happen, much common and a wider spectrum. And then I remember being on a phone call with a customer, one of these phone calls that we were doing, and this lovely lady was basically saying like, hey, I want to throw a taco party with your meat, and I want to be able to buy 6 packs of ground beef. And at that point, I was like, hey, you just have people like on both sides of the equation. You have the person that's going to buy 6 packs of ground beef and that the company is going to make a huge margin on because they want to throw a lovely taco party. And then you have people that just want to buy 6 ribeyes because they want to get the most value out of what they're paying for. So, by being so close to the customer, then we basically ended up, ditching this thing that said, hey, you can only select 3 from here and 3 from there. And we just made it a free for all, and it actually ended up being a much higher retention product for us.
That's really cool. I actually remember ordering ButcherBox for the first time. This was a while ago. I had a phase where I just ate meat for an entire month, and I needed to supply that meat. So I remember I went on ButcherBox, and I think I was in the days of the having 2 options.
Yep.
Because I remember I just wanted ribeyes because like that's what you eat on this
Yep.
diet is just ribeyes. So yeah, so I do have good experience with ButcherBox. I recall the days of like opening my freezer and just seeing ButcherBox ribeyes. So
How
big.
did the diet go for you?
It was cool. It was definitely weird because I came from a background of being heavy carbs. As an athlete, I ate nothing but pasta like constantly in college because that's kind of what you're
Mhm.
taught is like carb load before games, carb load after games, like recharge, rejuvenate. So I was coming from a place. Also, I was in Boston in the North End, which you probably know is like carb heaven. So I was basically
Yep.
just like constantly eating carbs every day. And so I went from that to zero, nothing, just meat, which I don't think looking back was super smart. And pretty much after I think 4 days of just doing meat, my body completely like I was playing basketball and I almost fainted. And I, I thought I was going to die because I guess I was just my body had no idea what to do. But after that, it was a weird phase where I like almost fainted, couldn't sleep. But then I would say a week later, it was really great. I saw a lot of health benefits, lost a lot of weight, had a lot of energy. Ultimately, I stopped just because I remember I had a drink at the end of the 30 days and I was like tipsy after a sip of alcohol. And I was like, all right, I don't think this is necessarily sustainable. So
So
anyway,
you cut the meat, but not the alcohol.
no, so I did cut. I cut the alcohol for 30 days, but day 31, I had a drink, and I was violently hungover in the morning. So
Yeah.
I was like, all right, you know what, this isn't. So now I do eat actually a lot of. I do eat a lot of meats and vegetables. I kind of cut out a lot of carbs. So
Yep.
Butcher Box was a part of my transition from like the North End pasta every night. So
What was your go-to place in the north end?
Trattoria Panino.
Oh yeah, big panino.
I
Their lobster
lived.
ravioli. How good is that?
Lobster ravioli. Yes, you clearly know what you're talking about. So any folks listening, Trattoria Panino, lobster ravioli, thank us later. We definitely know what we're talking about. So
And the veal parmigiana in case you're with someone and you want to share two plates.
there you go. Yeah. So I can't tell you how many different Italian restaurants I ate in Boston, but it was quite substantial. And some of those places, like Familia, the plates are like the size of your upper body, so you can walk out of there feeling like 200 pounds heavier.
Hmm.
Awesome. I want to talk a little bit about so previously at ButcherBox. I know that I saw on your LinkedIn you did a little bit of marketing. You were also doing logistics. You were doing pretty much. I mean, I imagine you were really part of that early team. I wanted to get your input on if there's anything interesting stories or when it comes to like getting off the ground, getting ButcherBox up and running. You guys were in a new space. I mean, this was not necessarily an industry that was as big as it is today, obviously. So, was there any cool stories back then that you guys had where you were able to market effectively or unique strategies to get things moving?
I mean, for us, the early days were always about how can we get people to buy frozen meat online. Like not even ButcherBox. Like forget about the brand. How can we get people to understand that they can go online, they can hit purchase and a box of frozen meat shows up at their doorstep. At the time, very, very early on, you had like, Omaha Steaks that was doing these like for special occasions and more geared towards gifting, but like, really no one else doing this on the frozen space. So for us, we definitely had to overcome that hurdle. And the way that we were able to accomplish that was we would basically look for specific niche markets or diets or audiences out there like the paleo diet or the keto diet, and we would look for who's influential in the space, who has a voice in the space that people listen to when they speak or when they have recommendations, and we will work very, very close with them to basically create the content that is worthwhile for their audience and create the content with them that it would basically make their audience understand that one, yes, they can buy frozen meat online, and then two, ButcherBox is a very good source or option for it. And it's funny, the strategy that we had initially for doing this was we would reach out to people who were influential in the space, and we would first add value to them. We would say, hey, we have an email list of 30,000 people who are customers and they like your content. Do you mind if we share this piece of content or this blog post with them? And then after they said yes, and we did that, then we would go back to them and say, hey, by the way, we sell frozen meat online, and if you want to make some money, just promote our company, our brand, and then we can pay you this much in affiliate or commissions. So that was a way that we basically like unlocked that initially, where we have people that ended up making a bunch of money with us on commissions. And nowadays it's much harder to do because there's a lot more brands that are willing to pay upfront for promotions, but we didn't have the cash when we were getting started. So that's why we had to get resourceful and basically figure out a way how can we add value to these people before we would ask for something from them. And then at the end, all these partnerships ended up being super beneficial for them.
Did you guys ever work with Joe Rogan? I feel like he would have been a
Oh
good
yeah,
one.
oh yeah, for sure. That was
Yeah.
one of our first biggest investments that we did on the marketing front was getting on Joe's episodes and podcast. Nowadays, it's a little different because back then when it was only on YouTube and it was not a Spotify owned podcast,
Hmm.
the promotions were basically evergreen. They would live in the videos for forever. Like no matter how many times they were played or whatsoever, they would just live in the video for forever. Now I think the game has changed a little bit, where you basically just pay per specific views, and every specific podcast has a rate for that. We were able to get very early on Joe's podcast, and that was a huge success for us since day one.
Yeah, I'm now thinking back to my days of the meat diet. You guys must have gotten in there at some point during my awareness stage. So that was probably good on you guys for finding your target market there.
Yeah, so I remember that when we went on Joe Rogan for the first couple times, that's when I realized that like, oh shit, we're running a big company, because now my friends knew about it. Like for forever I would be just the guy who's working on this random startup that my friends like just don't know what we do, or how are we shipping meat online. And then we went from that to being on Joe Rogan's podcast, and that's when the circle around me started noticing what we were doing. And then that's when when I mentioned ButcherBox, people now started to recognize the brand. So I think that was a pretty cool inflection point for us.
Yeah, I also think that's one really interesting and fun thing about D2C brands like ButcherBox is the fact that a lot of software companies, like when I was at HubSpot and Klaviyo, at Klaviyo though, a lot of people heard about just because they were involved with direct to consumer. But HubSpot, I would tell people, hey, I work at HubSpot, and they had hundreds of thousands of customers, but not a single one was typically my friends would ever experience. Whereas like
Yeah.
direct to consumer, I mean it's all over the podcast. ButcherBox is something that people buy. So I've always been excited by e-commerce just because of the distribution that e-commerce has. Specifically Shopify is that's why I chose to build Nifty Bridge, which alongside Shopify and into their platform, because it's such a powerful, like, e-commerce is like the biggest distribution network, one of the biggest that exists. So I think it's really cool that ButcherBox was able to do that, and you were able to kind of be a part of that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that part I do like, and I think I miss, which is the, hey, you're creating a brand that you're touching like directly millions of people with,
Hmm.
and at Grip, because we're one step behind that in the supply chain. I think we're now playing basically a behind the scenes role that it's very exciting once you understand the real impact that you're having,
Hmm.
and how many different end customers you're touching and improving the lifestyles by doing this. So it takes basically one more thought process to realize how big the impact is. But I do like how in the direct to consumer game you're basically just building a brand that, if successful, a lot of people are going to recognize.
Yeah. And what a great brand to build a playbook on top of as well, right? For Grip. So moving into Grip now, where you're really helping other brands sort of, it sounds like, perfect this model of shipping perishables. What's been some of the learnings there around, like, obviously you have ButcherBox that did it once, and I'm assuming you tried to recreate that, but what's been some of the learnings about the challenges with trying to recreate that at scale and for customers that might sell very different types of goods?
Yeah. So for us, I mean, I think that we have an unfair advantage because we come from the problem. Right? We were like on the forefront of building a brand that was basically leading, dealing with this problem day in day out. And our CTO, Jimmy Cooper, used to be head of data at ButcherBox as well. So basically, first data engineer that we had at the company, and then he ended up running the department as well. So he also brings that experience with him. So he comes from the problem. So for us, that has been extremely beneficial. And I think that leading back to your question, one of the things that have been very surprising for us, and not now that I think through it, I understand that it's because we're much more focused on product and value creation, is that we've had to do like zero marketing for this thing, or zeros like active sales. All the growth and all the business development has come from referrals from either current customers or people from the industry that worked on other parts of the industry that know, what type of a job and how are we helping our customers scale. So that has been, somewhat surprising in a sense that, I'm very like, proud to see that happen, and maybe something that we were not expecting. But now that it's happening, I can see why us being so focused on value creation and product development and just making sure that we're always adding value to our customer, it's then, causing that, because just, our customers are so happy that they go to other people that they see in the space that might need some help with this, or they can also optimize part of their supply chain for shipping direct to consumer perishables, that they just basically end up doing a referral to us, even, without us asking for it.
Yeah, and that's incredibly powerful, but I also think that that's incredibly difficult because a lot of brands, I think, hear that and they're thinking, amazing, like that. I want, what's the playbook there? So, follow-up question maybe is, and it sounds like ButcherBox had this as well, where you guys did have some pretty passionate customers. You leaned into them pretty heavily. If you had to think more tactically around how you guys leaned into your customers to kind of develop those relationships or build that sort of trust where referrals came, how did you guys accomplish that? Was there a tactical playbook, or was it more of a general just way you're treating customers?
Is that a grip or ButcherBox?
We'll start with ButcherBox and then go to Grip.
So ButcherBox, we actually had a very active referral program. I'm lucky enough to have led that program since day one as well. So in my marketing days, after working on affiliates and influencers and trying to get the brand out there, I then shifted into taking over all the social media, community building, and referral program as well. And the first program that we launched was refer three customers and then get your next box for free. So it was a very, very powerful program. And, I realized that our customers were very passionate about it, but we just needed to give them the tools so that they can, basically turn around and tell their family and friends about it. So we were very intentional about it. We were very active about it. And we were basically sending, every couple of weeks, dedicated emails about the referral program, remembering our customers what process, or, what were the different tools that they had to their disposition so that they can refer their friends and family. And we were always trying to make it easier for them. So going into our referral program, understanding what's the process and how many clicks you have to make to refer your friends and family. How do you type the email? How many emails can you type at the same time? If you have to divide it by a comma, or like go to the next basic like input line. Like we were very, very strategic about that, and running A, B, and C and D tests all the time with what was performing the best. And it was funny. At some point, we basically A/B tested an email that on one front was very, very elaborate, and it had a beautiful image and it had a beautiful graphic about ButcherBox, something that definitely one of our customers would have write themselves. And then on the other front, we tested a very scrappy, like three-liner email with just a normal photo about the product, and that second email performed like three times better than the more elaborated email. And that was just because we were basically coming from like the voice of our customers, and we were just giving them the tool to with a very easy one click just send that to their friends that they thought that would be a very good option for this. We also saw referrals via email convert at least 10 times better than any type of referrals via social media, which then speaks to how basically targeted marketing works so much better than just guerrilla or like shotgun marketing, where you're basically putting out content out there that's not necessarily targeted towards an audience. So we saw that when people would just send the referral program directly to their friends, would convert at least 10 times better.
That's really interesting. So I feel like there's an element where you were basically like, hey, if a customer wants to refer us business, right, that might be a tiny amount that they want to refer. It's like just enough where they're like, okay, I'll click a button. And so you guys were like, how do we make it so it's just as easy as possible and so there's zero friction?
Yeah, correct. And then I grip, very, very different, because we don't really have a specific playbook for this, or it's not something that we're actively seeking from our customers, or we don't really have like a system to, refer us
Hmm.
to customers. But I think it just has been a byproduct to how much value we're adding to our customers, because, this is a relatively, small industry that, it's up and coming and it's growing pretty fast, but it's still relatively small. So people know each other in the industry. So I think the best referral program that you can do in the industry is just provide a good service and add value.
Yeah, and don't overcomplicate it either. I think that's
Hmm.
another lesson probably from you is if you want to do a referral program, make it as simple as possible and focus on spending your time driving value for your customers as opposed to
Agreed.
potentially maybe a crazy, as you guys have learned, a crazy marketing asset that you spend an hour on, right, might just not be what resonates with your customer base.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
so what's on the topic of referrals, because there's a lot of people that are listening to this that are in that world of trying to kind of growth hack their way to referrals. And I see so many referral programs now to the point where I almost like tune them out, to be honest. Like, even if it's a brand that I really love, I see like the classic, I mean, even Equinox, they do like a really strong referral system and they really take the time. So maybe they're a good example. But I'm curious to you, like, what's a good example taking ButcherBox away of like a referral program that exists today that you think does a really good job of what execution of that should look like?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have a specific example to it, but I started playing tennis again a couple years ago, and I've been using this app called Swing Vision, which I think completely changes the tennis game. And they have not paid me a dime, and I have not, like actively been trying to refer friends to this or anything like that. But basically every single tennis player that I meet that I know that it's into the game and likes to understand how are they hitting the ball and how can they improve, I talk to them about the app. And this is not paid, this is not incentivized. The only thing that I'm getting from this company is a very good product and a very big value add. So I'll go back to that and say that that's just the strongest referral program that you can have. And we saw it at ButcherBox, where we would speak with customers, and like sometimes they would even reject any type of like referral incentive. They'd be like, hey, no, I love the product, and I actually have referred you like 20 plus people from the people that I know and my neighbors and my friends and my family, and that's just because I'm a strong believer in what you guys are doing. So that's, I think, the best execution for a referral program is just, hey, focus on building your brand.
Yeah, I think there's an element too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like it's a lot more of, hey, enable the referral as opposed to incentivizing it. So it's like people are ready to give you a referral, and the main thing you need to do is give them a pathway to do it super efficiently and make their lives easy to do it, as opposed to thinking about it as like, hey, we're going to incentivize referrals. Because the reality is, it sounds to me like most people are already in that frame of reference of like, oh, I totally would share this, or no, like, and no offer is honestly going to get me to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't like the product, there's not a single offer that can get you to refer this to someone. Or maybe if the offer is good enough, you'll do it once and you'll take the offer and run. But you don't get anything with like getting one referral. You want these to be multiple referrals, and that's how you grow a company exponentially. So I agree with you. Like it's about allowing people to do it, but it's not that much about like throwing cash at the problem or like incentivizing it too much. It's about focusing on how are your customers happy about this, like how much are your customer happy about your product and how much value are you adding to them.
Yeah. So when you moved into software now at Grip, you guys are still doing, it sounds to me like it's still obviously there's a lot more perishable goods being sold, but now grip, it sounds like, is really revolutionizing the technology behind these perishable goods and logistics. So moving from kind of helping build the industry to helping build the technology behind the industry, I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you think about positioning yourself as like a leader or thought leader in that space, because it sounds to me like it's relatively new. So I was curious to get your ideas on how you guys at grip have sort of positioned yourselves as, hey, we're the go-to experts when it comes to this sort of thing.
So I think it has happened kind of naturally just because of the innovation that we're bringing to the space, and it being an industry that's usually, on the logistics and operations driven by very old companies that have been around for a long time, that are basically like pallet in, pallet out warehousing companies that have transformed their operation into like a pick and pack fulfillment without necessarily having the proper technology to back that up. So just because we're the ones like bringing innovation to the space, and bringing the background of coming from the brand and from the problem, it has kind of like happened naturally. I don't think that we're doing a good enough effort to push that more, and put more valuable content out there for our brands and the audience that follows us. But that's definitely something that we need to do much better. But I do think that because we're disrupting the space, because we're the new technology in the space, because we bring a much different dynamic decision making to the space, you know uh, companies and brands look to us to basically help them figure out how can they navigate the space.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I think that something I've learned with running Nifty Bridge is just how these incredibly large brands that you normally would think, hey, they have everything figured out. They know every optimization. They understand all these avenues for growth. And I think that you can sometimes, as a founder, think that if something's super big and successful, that they have everything figured out. And I think one of the things I've learned is that that's just not the case at all. And even the biggest brands are looking for people to sort of build these playbooks, help them understand, build this documentation, build these case studies, build these use cases, because ultimately, like, they're just like every other brand. They have more resources, but sometimes that can even be a withstraining or a straining mechanism on growth, because they are so big. It's hard to implement new things and learn quickly. So I think companies like Grip, companies like Nifty Bridge, we're nimble, we're a little bit smaller, so we can take risks, we can build kind of the future, and we can show them through case studies, use cases, statistics, how it's done. And I think that sometimes, for me personally, when I was just bootstrapping my company, it was hard to get into that mindset that that was possible, because you're constantly thinking like, hey, these big companies, they don't, why would they need me, right?
Yeah, I mean, once you figure out that you can actually have a very big impact with your still small company in one of these very large big corporate organizations, I think that's a mindset unlock as well, where you understand why are they not doing it and how slow some of these companies move. So I also think that you just need to be ready for like moving quickly on your end, and also making this be a small lift, small investment for them to start with, but opening the doors so that they can integrate with you, so that they can try the product, and so that they can see how much of a value add this is before they have to, bring on a full team, and try to, do a full implementation or a full integration to start with. Because that's the reason why they're trying to work with someone with you, because they can't move as fast internally. So it would be a little bit counterintuitive to basically expect them to bring on the full on team to do an integration. But once you figure out some type of product that they can try with, low lift from their side, big value out on your end, you really see that value unlock of like, oh damn, I can work with these pretty big companies that I thought had everything figured out.
Yeah, and this is a lesson I learned the hard way. I think I made the mistake, as a super excited. I wanted to build cool stuff. I mean, that's why I started a
Mm-hmm.
company. I'm sure, you can relate to that idea of just like building for the sake of building and not really caring necessarily about like customer and like what they think. And this was just, mind you, this was like my mindset early on. And then now, having to scale a company and realizing like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how amazing your ideas are if they're not going to be implemented, or if they're not easy enough to be implemented by large organizations. where they're not trying to like reinvent the wheel. They're just trying to get their wheel to spin a little bit faster. So that kind of mindset shift really, I had to take what I was thinking and and I don't want to say dumb it down, but make it simpler by like 90%, honestly.
Hmm.
And then once it was there, it was like, now next year, all I'm thinking about is exactly kind of like your mindset was with the referral program, but it's like, how do I take away any reason for people to say no? Like, how do I turn something like loyalty, which is actually incredibly complex, and how do I turn it into sort of just a key that you need to turn, and we can turn it faster as you guys start to see those results?
Yeah, and that also goes back to what I was saying before about developing a product with your customer, not
Mm-hmm.
for your customer, because I see that mistake, being done quite regularly, where people lock themselves in a room for 6 months and they create a product that they think is going to add value to the customer, and then they wait, put it out there. Customer was expecting something completely different, or they have moved on past the product. Their leadership is not interested in solving that anymore. It's not a priority, or it's just doesn't solve the problem. So the way to get around that is just bringing the customer on day one, even before you start writing a single line of code. And you can even start solving that problem without a complex solution, but something that solves part of the problem. And then
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're adding value since day one, then you can just bring them into the equation to make sure that you're creating a product that's actually going to be used and valuable for them, and something that people are actually willing to pay for as well. Because sometimes people say, hey, yeah, I'm going to pay for this X amount of money. And once you put the product out, it's just really not the value that they thought it was going to be. And they just, don't end up paying that much money that they thought they were going to pay. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as you keep them, close to you and just work day in, day out with the customer, I think that's a way to de-risk that operation.
Yeah, and now I'm trying to think of, was there any time at ButcherBox, I guess specifically, where you guys had that? Oh, actually, I think you mentioned that there was a feedback loop around the pricing options. Was there another example of that, or was that kind of the main example of how you kind of use customers to help you build out the actual product offering itself?
I mean, another example that I would say about that is when we started shipping frozen meat in the mail, there was really no other option than doing it with styrofoam at the time. So styrofoam, has been around for a pretty long time, and that was basically the off-the-shelf solution. And we were never comfortable with that, to the sense that we never said like, hey, this is going to be our long-term solution. But the way that we approached that was, hey, this is not the problem that we're solving today. The problem that we're solving today is how do we get grass-fed beef to people's doorsteps from a source that they can trust. So once we started solving the problem and getting customers and now getting revenue and now basically having a bigger audience that we can now use to drive change in the industry, is when we then look back and we said, hey, how can we get rid of these styrofoam boxes that we didn't want to use in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
But if we were to try to solve that problem since day one, then we would just have been basically like locked in that problem solving for something that was not our main priority. But we used the customer to basically build volume to get to a place where then we had a good purchasing power, so that we can then go back and influence the packaging industry so that someone can develop something that worked much better for us, that was not styrofoam.
Yeah, and that's almost empowering too as a customer to feel like, I don't know if you guys ever told customers that they were sort of a part of that, but I think that that's really cool as a customer to like feel like you're a part of enacting change in an industry that typically was dominated by just styrofoam.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like the long-term customers, they saw the full evolution of the packaging. We went through at least 7 or 9 types of different materials and packaging, and all of it was done because we had the customers and the volume. We could never have done it without them.
Looking forward to the new year, because I know we're headed into the holidays, and you're probably, hopefully, going to be. I mean, you're in Miami right now, so you're already capable of hitting the beach. But I'm curious to get what are you excited about the most for the new year, specifically with Grip?
Very excited about the year. As I was saying, we had our 2024 company planning retreat last week, and I'm nothing short of extremely excited for next year for this company, because We're probably the fastest growing company in the space, and everything that we're doing is accelerating that, and everything that we're doing is adding value to the customers. So we're building product extremely fast, and I just see how interconnected we are with our customers, to the point where we act extremely fast on feedback, and we keep them very close to the product development cycles that I was mentioning before that we do. So I think that basically just helps us accelerate even more and more, even though we're already a pretty fast growing company. So I'm very excited about that, and I think that we have the right team in place to tackle that as well, and just to tackle the basically innovation in the industry, and just keep being the disruptor company that we are.
And what's something that you learned this year? So now looking back into 2023, it could be about specifically to grip, but in general, would love to hear like what's your biggest learning from this year?
Uh, there's quite a few. It's a lot of learnings. I mean, definitely a reinforcement for me is having the right people in the right seats and trusting them to do great work, is the way to keep scaling fast and growing a company, and making sure that they grow as a person and professionally, as well. It is something that we've seen a grip this year, and that we want to continue to see moving into the new year. So seeing that a group this year was definitely a reinforcement that, hey, that's definitely the right approach, for trusting people, and just allowing them to be excellent at their work.
That's awesome. Well, want to thank you again, Juan, for your time today. A lot of learnings. I know that their listeners listening in are going to have a lot of takeaways to take back to their company. So really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great holiday break, and you guys, wishing you the best of luck for 2024. Also, before I go, if people are selling, or maybe you can kind of talk through like what customers would be a good fit for Grip, and then where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's shipping something perishable in the mail, it can be refrigerated or frozen. We work with direct to consumer companies in the space, and they can go to gripshipping.com and reach out to us via the website, or they can find us in LinkedIn as well. Grip or Grip Shipping, just type it in there and you'll find us. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on the pod, and it's great to see you, and also wish you the best for 2024.
Thanks, Juan. Appreciate it, man.